My name is John Silva, and I was a former correctional officer for the California Department of Corrections at DVI in Tracy. Okay, so what we did is you do 1 week orientation. So you spend your first week at the prison in the in-service training area, and they go over certain things that you're going to need to know before you actually go to the academy. So after the 1 week of orientation, then we did 6 weeks at the academy. And what they teach you at the academy is basically how to function in a correctional environment, as far as the history of the Department of Corrections, and then certain things about self-defense, about how to restrain somebody, how not to restrain somebody, how to apply restraint gear, all the things that you're going to need to know once you come into the prison. So that was 6 weeks, and it's physical conditioning. You're doing PT every day, physical training every day, also to make sure that the people that aren't in shape are physically able to handle running down the corridors, tackling somebody if you have to, being able to physically restrain somebody if you have to, basically doing the things that you would need to do to function in the correctional environment.
So the first day.
So the first day. So this is a funny thing. So I get out of the academy, and I've got my uniform. Now I'm an official correctional officer or prison guard, whichever way you want to call it. And I'm driving into work. And those are people that anyone that's ever been to Tracy, they know that when you first come in the road there's a long entry road, and there's the fences and the guard towers. And I remember driving in and looking over at the guard towers and looking at the cell blocks and asking myself, do I really want to do this? I mean, I just came through 6 weeks of an academy where I'm taught everything about what I need to be as being a correctional officer, but just the intimidation factor of driving in and seeing the razor wire, seeing the guard towers, seeing the cell blocks, and just thinking to myself, man, do I really want to do this? But then I told myself, I didn't really want to drive truck for the rest of my life either, so let's give it a shot. So I did. And that was my first day.
Confident.
You know, you accept the reality, but if you let fear play in, you're not going to be effective. You know, that old fight or flight thing. We actually had officers that when there was an incident, they actually ran the other way, and you can't go in there like that. You know, it's just like to compare. You know, like if you're in a gang, and all of a sudden things jump off, you can't think about fear. You know, you think about, you got to jump in, you got to do what you got to do. And so it was kind of the same thing, was that, you know, in the back of your mind, the potential is always there. You know, have people been killed in prison? Yes, they have. But what's the numbers? You know, what's the number of people that have been in prison, whether they've been in custody or whether they have been staff? What's the number that have actually been killed? Like when I started at Tracy, there'd only been 2 deaths since 1953. Well, I started in 1984. If only two guards had been killed in that many years, the chances of me getting killed there, you know, were pretty slim. So with that in mind, I knew there was a potential you could get stabbed. Stabbings were very common back in the mid-'80s. So, you know, that's where the respect factor came in. I think respect was a bigger issue than fear. You know, if you respected people, they respected you. In fact, after a short amount of time working at the prison, I actually had to readjust outside the prison, because people that had killed people would respect me inside the prison environment. Yet I'd go into a store and some teenage kid would cut in front of me in line, and I'd want to grab him by the back of the neck thinking, who are you? You know, who are you? I got killers that give me respect, and you know, you're just some kid that's like trying to squeeze in front of me in line. So then I had to kind of check myself and tell me, man, this is just a kid. You know, a kid doesn't know better yet. But the respect level, that was one of the things that I really, really liked, if you will, about prison, is it was no nonsense. You know, you could have a sense of humor, but you knew where the line was. You didn't say things about people, certain personal things, that you would front them off. Because if you fronted somebody off, they don't have anywhere to go they're going to have to deal with it. And if you disrespect somebody, they're going to deal with you. So treat people like you want to be treated. And that's how I always was. And you kind of loosen up over time. You kind of know who you can kind of joke around with, and you know who you never joke around with. And so you kind of take each personality on an individual basis, and then you just get to know those individuals, and then you function on a day-to-day basis with those personalities that way. Actually, by 84, it was pretty much a Southern prison. Yeah. Because of the stronghold, if you will, I guess that the Northern Hispanics had on Tracy at one time, they eventually shipped them all out. And it basically, when I got there, it was a Southern line. In fact, the majority of the black inmates that we had there were actually from down south also. And when I started there, they used to let them have their bandanas. And it was really, we liked it. As staff, we liked it because you knew who the players were just by what rags they had, right? And so there was a lot of blue rags on the line. You didn't I don't think there were any red rags at that time. It's just the way that it was. You had different groups. Like the bikers, there were some green rags. One particular club has a green rag. You'd have some that just had a brown rag because they were just Hispanic, but they weren't in a particular gang. And so there were these different bandanas that people had. But by and far, 1984, it was primarily a Southern line.
Yeah, and I remember at that time. I remember because it had switched over. I thought you were there during the switch over. Okay, so I get there around 88, and on the yard there was only blue rags.
Yep.
The Northerners weren't allowed to wear red rags, and there was a good amount of them, but they weren't allowed to. And I remember, and it's good you brought up that question. That answer, because around 1990, all of a sudden you started to see a red hat, a red bandana. The Northerners started to say, hey, we're not going to be punk no more. We're going to start bringing that red bandana back. And what, in a CO's mind, what are you guys thinking watching all this? Are you guys thinking what's going to happen now that red's coming back out? Or
there was a reintegration period. By the time I retired, we had people from up north, Hispanics from up north, and Hispanics from down south. We had, the primary black groups that were there, or gangs, if you will, were the Crips and the Bloods, which again was your blue rags and your red rags. And again, by the time I retired, we had both aspects on the line. I think it just took time to get them reintegrated to where you had people from different parts of the state at the same prison. But it did take time, and there's a transition process. When you're like the first bus, the first bus of guys from up north that are getting put on the line at DBI, it's a little transition. And the same thing as the first groups of Bloods, when it's primarily a Crip line, there's that transition period, where you got to come in and hold your own and until things are established.
Yeah, and I remember during that time when the red came back, and it was blue, red, and then it was fully, and the red, the Northerners came back with their red rags, and there was nothing started, it just, what it was. But then there came a time they took away all the colors.
Right.
Remember that? What was the decision behind that?
So, and I don't know, again, this came from the higher ups. And like I said, myself and the other custody, we liked it because we knew who was who. Once you took away the bandanas or the rags, however you want to call it, then what you had was everybody was the same. So it was more work on us. Like, for example, if there was a situation on the yard and they were allowed to have the bandanas, well, you knew who you took off the yard in what group, because you knew these guys were from this group and these guys were from that group. But once you took away the bandanas or the rags, whichever you want to call them, everybody's the same. So now you're having to try to figure out, and maybe you got a sleeper, right? Maybe you got a guy, say for example, there's an issue, say there's a situation between like a northern and southern faction, and one guy, he's the torpedo. So they say, where are you from? And let's say that he's from up north, but he says, oh, I'm from down south. Okay, so they haul him off with the southern guys, and then he wants to try to make another move, right? Because he's the torpedo. So it was a lot easier. It was a lot easier when they allowed him to do that. And again, I don't know why. I don't know why administration at some point they decided to take that away, because to us it was easier to identify people that way.
But I don't know if you even know about the situation, but recently, if you follow you follow YouTube, you follow all the interviews. This guy Mike Thompson came out and he said he knocked out like 7 Nuestra Familias.
Yeah.
And I don't know one person that could beat up 7 armed person. Armed. Recently, Nick Diaz a couple of years ago from Stockton, UFC fighter, said he fought 3 dudes, and that guy's a killer. He fought 3 dudes, and they got the better of him. And he's like, you don't want to fight 3 dudes. So this guy's saying he fought 7 dudes, and he beat them. Do you know if there's any truth to that story, or if there's any truth to that? So, like Mitch, I saw the interview. I saw the original interview that Mike Thompson did on like Nat Geo or something like that. There was actually an interview that they did with him, and it had to do with the gang that he was in, and him dropping out of that gang. And when I saw the interview the second go around, where he's claiming all these things that he did, again, from my perspective, I questioned it, because it just didn't quite seem real to me. So I reached out to Mitch and asked Mitch, and of course I'm sure Mitch got asked that question more times than he wanted to. Do you know this guy, and is this stuff true? And I asked actually somebody that was at DVI at the time when he claimed that he took on these 7 Northerners that were sent to kill him. And from the reports that I got,